for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and welcome to the Nigel Farage Show with me, Camilla Tominey. Do not adjust your set. I am here for the week, standing in as the main man continues to eat all sorts of indescribable foods in the jungle. But we've got a jam-packed show for you tonight, as you would imagine. We're going to, of course, be discussing immigration. Suella Braverman once again clashing with Rishi Sunak, even though she's out of office. We found out the plan that they hatched together on Rwanda, and it doesn't make for particularly pretty reading. Also had more shenanigans in the House of Commons today about an immigration plan that the government seems to be at odds with itself on. So we'll be talking about that a little later. Also going to be discussing the march against anti-Semitism in London that I was on yesterday with some GB colleagues and also my daughter. Very moving, very peaceful, it must be said. So we're going to be speaking to Gideon Falter, who organised that. Of course, we do have to talk about Nigel in the jungle. Don't know about you, if you've been watching it. Could be better. It could. I think we're not getting enough airtime of Nigel. We're getting too much airtime of people that don't actually have that much interesting stuff to say. But we have got a guest here tonight who has got something interesting to say. He was at the centre of an I'm a Celebrity scandal. Don't know if you remember, but he was caught stealing treats, strawberries and cream at one point. It's the boxer Amir Khan. He's going to join us. Also like to get his take on what he thinks about whether there needs to be a punch-up on air in order for it to be more interesting. But all of that's still to come. A jam-packed hour ahead. But first, of course, here's the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Camilla, thank you and good evening to you. Well, our top story from the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has said the business model of people smuggling gangs will be destroyed, as he attempted today to underline the government's commitment to stopping illegal migration. James cleverly made the comments as he faced questions in the House of Commons for his first time as Home Secretary. He said the government is doing all it can to stop small boat crossings.
The people who are being smuggled are seen as just products. They are expendable in the eyes of those people smugglers, and we have to do everything we can, and we will do, to break their business model. I commend the work of my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, who has recently been to Bulgaria, where in close cooperation with our international partners in Bulgaria, we have seized boats, we have seized engines, we are breaking the business model.
James Cleverly. Now, a two-day extension to the humanitarian truce between Israel and the Hamas terror group has been welcomed by the White House today. The fresh agreement expected to see an exchange of more hostages and prisoners between Israel and Hamas. It comes as Egypt said it was expecting about 11 Israeli hostages to be released, and we expect that to be today as well. Negotiations are ongoing, we understand, for the release of 33 Palestinian prisoners. So far, Hamas has released 58 women and children, and Israel has freed 117 Palestinian prisoners. Nearly £30 billion is being invested into new business projects in the UK. The Prime Minister told a global summit today there is positive momentum in the UK economy, particularly, he said, in the science, tech and creative sectors. Rishi Sunak said the UK's low tax approach and the culture of innovation in the UK give us a competitive advantage. The UK's first case of a new strain of swine flu has been detected in North Yorkshire. The Health Security Agency said the person contracted what's known as the H1N2 strain. That is similar to a virus found in pigs. That person has since fully recovered after experiencing what's been described as a fairly mild illness. There is, though, increased surveillance now in surgeries and hospitals in northern England as the authorities try to work out exactly what the source of the infection was. New disciplinary powers for police chiefs could be introduced from next year. They're expected to make it easier for bosses to sack officers who've been found guilty of wrongdoing, while also allowing senior officers to preside over misconduct hearings. It follows plans unveiled by the government earlier this year aimed at restoring public trust in policing. And finally, an agreement has been struck between the government and England's top doctors that could bring an end to strike action. The government has agreed to increase the total pay award for consultants by 4.5%. Union members are now going to vote on that proposal, which, if passed, will see strikes called off. That's the news on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Right, let's get into this immigration story. You'll be familiar with the figures. Last week we heard that a record 750,000 people came into the year to last December. So that's 2022, a record number of legal migrants coming into the country. You know about the issue with stopping the boats. The illegal numbers, just to remind you, last year coming into the Channel by boat were 45,000. However, does look as if the Cabinet is at odds with itself over this issue. We've heard over the weekend some interesting rhetoric from the Home Secretary, James Cleverly. He's described the Rwanda scheme in rather unfavourable terms, not a word I can repeat at this time in the evening, but said it was bat something crazy. He's also said in an interview on Sunday that we shouldn't be fixated on the Rwanda deal, that it isn't the be-all and end-all. And that language was repeated by the Prime Minister today. He's at that global summit at the Hampton Court Palace, and he's basically talking about the type of people who should get visas. And this is what he said.
But we don't have a monopoly on talent in this country. And we recognise that nearly half of our most innovative companies have an immigrant founder. So if you're an innovator, an entrepreneur, a researcher, you should know that the most competitive visa regime for highly skilled international talent is right here in the UK. And let me just give you one example. Our new high potential individual visa means that if you're a young person who's graduated from a global top 50 university, you can just come to the UK and stay here with your family for 2 years to just explore, work, study, invent. Nothing like that exists anywhere else in the world.
So that was Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, I think, very much talking in terms of more immigration, particularly among students, even though student visas are increasingly a concern, particularly among right-wing backbenchers who effectively think that this number is too high. And it's too high because a lot of students are bringing in dependents. Now, we've heard again today that Robert Jenrick, who's the immigration minister, worked very closely with Braverman, is apparently on resignation watch. That's what's been reported. His people deny that, but he seems to be at odds with Cleverly over the Rwanda deal. He appeared in the House of Commons earlier this afternoon, and this is what he said.
Well, when my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and I set out our comprehensive plan this time last year, it had many facets, one of which, and an extremely important component of which, was our Rwanda plan. But it was not the only element of our plan. And we have worked intensively over the course of the last 12 months on each and every other facet of that plan. And those on the opposite benches jeer, but is that plan working? Yes, it is.
This is confusing me because I thought the whole impetus behind stopping the boats was to have the Rwanda plan as a deterrent. And then we've had over the weekend James Cleverly saying that it's not the be-all and end-all. And we've now got Robert Jenrick, who was disagreeing with James Cleverly but seemingly has been brought into line, saying that the Rwanda plan isn't central to the government's plan to stop the boats. So I'm confused, you're probably confused. That's why the question tonight is going to be, is it time to abandon the Rwanda plan? I mean, at the end of the day, if the government can't get these flights to take off next year, and it remains to be seen, frankly, whether they can mount this legal challenge, come up with this emergency legislation, it might get through the Commons, will it get through the Lords, not without a huge amount of opposition. Therefore, is Rwanda just the wrong plan completely? Maybe they should consider processing migrants in another country, a British overseas territory perhaps, but not Rwanda, because the Supreme Court isn't happy with Rwanda as a country. I personally am struggling with this idea that they can introduce emergency legislation to suggest that Rwanda is safe, even though the Supreme Court doesn't think it is. But enough from what I think. I'd like to hear from you. So do get in touch. Email farage@gbnews.com or tweet #Farage on GB News and tell us what you think about the Rwanda plan, because it could be that you like the idea of the deterrent, but clearly this plan, pardon the pun, is not going to be taking off anytime soon. Well, let's have a word now with somebody who does know his onions when it comes to the law of the land, Robert Buckland, Conservative MP for South Swindon. Of course, he previously served as Justice Secretary and Welsh Secretary. Robert, lovely to see you this evening. Clear something up for us then. We have James Cleverly saying that the Rwanda plan isn't the be-all and end-all. We've now got Robert Jenrick saying, oh, don't focus on Rwanda. I mean, you'll forgive us for focusing on Rwanda because that's precisely what the government's been focusing on for months and months and months, promising us that these flights will take off. Is Rwanda not the plan anymore, Robert? Clear it up for us.
Well, I've always said that Rwanda wasn't the be-all and end-all, and I'm very glad to hear the Home Secretary and Robert Jenrick agree with me, because actually when you look at what the government's been doing, you know, the big game changer here, or the dial mover, was the Albania deal that the Prime Minister managed to sort out at the end of last year, which saw a really steep reduction, in fact, an end to these young Albanian men coming over here, you know, on the boat, swinging the lead and really causing problems. You know, that's been solved, and we started to see the numbers come down on these small boats, which is good. So it begs the question, you know, will Rwanda help or hinder? I think there's still legs in it. I still think it's worth pursuing, because the principle of using a third country has been agreed as legal. You know, that's not the problem. The question is whether Rwanda will fit the bill. And it seems to me, unless the government does more, unless Rwanda does more to satisfy everybody that it's a safe country, then we will continue to struggle with the problems that we saw up to and including the Supreme Court judgment.
So can I just confirm, you haven't got a problem necessarily with processing migrants overseas, but you've got a problem, as the Supreme Court does, with Rwanda as a location. I mean, where else could they do it? They could look at, I remember interviewing Richard Tyson here last week, and he was saying, well, we're looking at a British overseas territory. He wouldn't say which one. I'm presuming he means the Falklands, Ascension Island, or somewhere like that. Would that be preferable, Robert?
Well, look, I used to have responsibility as a minister for working with the overseas territories. They're really small, and you know, accessibility and facilities are not great in these places. You need to invest a lot of money on building, you know, accommodation, etc. It seems to me that could be, and look, other European countries are doing this, seeking deals with other countries to process. So Austria's looking at it. Denmark's been looking at it for years. There's nothing sort of special or exceptional about this, but we do need to find places where it could practically work. Now, I'm not saying Rwanda's a dead letter. I mean, I think more work could be done by the Rwandans themselves and indeed by us through treaty to really make sure that the system is watertight. But at the end of the day, what we need to do, I think, here, Camilla, is make sure that we differentiate between illegals and legals and not make this debate all about the confluence of the two. They are two different issues.
Well, let's talk about legal. Let's talk about legal, because that figure of, it's actually 742,000, I believe, that came into the end of December 2022. That's far too high. It totally flies in the face of promises made by consecutive Prime Ministers. David Cameron talked about tens of thousands. Theresa May talked about tens of thousands. The Tory party manifesto in 2019 talks about controlling the borders with an Australian points-based system. We've now got a row, seemingly within the Tory party, between those who think that there should be a 40k cap on people coming in, that they should be earning 40k or above. That's a Boris Johnson suggestion. Apparently that was also in the deal that Suella Braverman allegedly struck with Rishi Sunak. But then you've got One Nationers like Damien Green saying that that threshold's too high and could lead to a staffing shortage in the NHS. But the public can't have much confidence in the Conservative Party solving these issues if they can't even agree between themselves.
Well, first of all, Camilla, the numbers, I think, need to be drilled down. About a tenth of that is going to be people from Ukraine and Hong Kong that we all warmly welcome to our country. A huge proportion is students themselves. Where I agree with concerns is that there are too many dependents coming with the students that we need to sort out, and I agree with that. If you overpitch the salary level, and I think there is a case to increase it because of inflation, and it hasn't been adjusted for a long time. If you price it too high, we will end up with shortages in key job areas like care. And frankly, all that does is just increase wage inflation and create the sort of problem that lead to overall inflationary pressures in the economy. So this is all about getting the balance right, acknowledging the fact still got too many people who are economically inactive here in the UK, but dealing with that problem isn't going to be solved overnight. That's going to take years, and therefore we need to strike the balance between making sure our care sector, our farming sector, people, but not allowing this sort of floodgates to continue.
Quick final question. When it comes to dependents, who should be able to come on the back of a student visa? I mean, we're seeing cases where people are bringing their grandparents over. Grandparents aren't immediate family. It should be for students, perhaps, who have children, or to bring their spouse or their partner over, but nobody else, surely.
I agree with you, bang on, Camilla. I think we need to absolutely tighten that up. There's evidence that some of those numbers have gone haywire in the last couple of years, up from a few thousands up to the 80 or more thousand. I think that would be a quick win for the government. But I do think, at the end of the day, people will accept students coming here because we know that they're going to go back. And it's making sure that the system is enforced so that people have confidence in that, which really, I think, annoys and irritates many of our electorate. And it's getting that enforcement right that the government has to concentrate on in the months and years ahead.
Amen to that, Robert Buckland. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Well, in just a minute, we'll hear your views on the Rwanda plan. Plus, with the UK government pursuing similar measures to countries like Australia, we'll head down under to join GB News' Ben Leo, who'll be getting the view of Aussies on how they tackled their own small boats crisis.
I didn't like that.
Why not?
That made me ashamed to be Australian, honestly.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because we're a nation of immigrants. That's who we are.
And we'll also be speaking to Gideon Falter. He's the man who was behind the march against anti-Semitism on Sunday. I was there. I'm going to share with you what it was like and what the atmosphere was like. So we're going to be back with all of that very, very soon.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, earlier I asked you, is it time to abandon the Rwanda plan? Let's see what you're saying. Ali says, the Rwanda plan shows one thing. It is time to abandon the not-so-conservative party. That's one approach. Tony says, forget Rwanda, just stop the boats. Tony, I don't know if you can stop the boats without the deterrent that Rwanda provides, but let's see. Mick says, the Rwanda plan is a dead duck, and so is the Tory party. After 13 years, they are still all at sea, just like the small boats. I like what you've done there, Mick. And Carl says, it's time to abandon the Tories, as they will never stop the boats. No confidence at all in the government solving this issue. And to be fair, I can't blame you, because there does seem to be a little bit of infighting in the Conservative Party and indeed Cabinet about this entire issue and whether Rwanda is the plan to go with at all, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Now, let's move on to the March Against Anti-Semitism, which I attended on Sunday. I took my daughter with me. Actually, she said she wanted to come with. She knew I was going after work, took some GB News colleagues. I have to say, it was the most sort of touching and moving, heartfelt event I think I've ever been involved with. I'm not somebody who goes out and waves placards and goes to marches and that kind of thing, but my stepmother's mother was an Auschwitz survivor, and I've written about her extensively in my journalistic career. I went out to Auschwitz for the 75th anniversary of the liberation there, and it was... you know, I've grown up with a lot of Jewish school friends. I just felt it was right as a non-Jew to stand up for the Jewish community on that day, and that's why I went. We were obviously pleased to see Boris Johnson there, soon to be on air on GB News. He did give an interview to Catherine Forster, I believe. This is what he said about being there.
I think it's very sad in a way that this march has to take place at all. Well, I'm afraid it does, because what we're all doing here, and the only thing we're really doing, is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary, because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is, I'm afraid, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas and what they did on October the 7th. And I just think we need to remember that. And, you know, whatever the rights and wrongs of what Israel has done or is doing, I think that the anti-Semitism that we've seen in some of these marches around Western Europe and further afield has really confirmed for me the absolute necessity, the human necessity for Israel to exist.
Well, Gideon Falter, the chief executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which helped to organise the march on Sunday, joins me now. Gideon, good to see Boris Johnson there. Were you disappointed not to see London Mayor Sadiq Khan there?
I mean, it is curious, isn't it? There's been a 1,350% surge in anti-Semitic crime in London, and Sadiq Khan, by virtue of being mayor of London, is essentially the police and crime commissioner for London. And it is curious that he didn't find the time to be there on yesterday. It did cross my mind.
The other thing I found curious was Darren Jones, who's a kind of shadow Treasury Minister, saying, well, I didn't go on any marches and, you know, I'm just not going to go on marches. I'm not going to get involved in marches because I've got lots of different constituents. And I sort of thought, well, hang on a minute. A march against anti-Semitism isn't a political march, is it? It's a march saying we don't agree with Jew hate being spouted on the streets of London or indeed anywhere in the UK.
It's something that seems to happen with hatred of Jews that doesn't seem to happen with other forms of hatred. So you had this extraordinary story that the BBC had told staff that they shouldn't go on this march because it might be political, and then they later backtracked and said, actually, we didn't tell staff anything, we just told them they can't go on any marches at all. But I'm pretty sure they weren't saying that, for example, during Black Lives Matter.
No.
So there is this strange idea among some people that fighting anti-Semitism, standing up to hatred of Jews, is a kind of racism that is in some way political. I'd love for them to explain how on earth they think that's political.
It's interesting you mentioned the BBC. I did take a photograph of somebody who held up a banner with shame on the BBC or similar. I mean, they've not covered themselves in glory at all, not only about the banning of people going on this march, allegedly, but also in some of the coverage. We've had Jeremy Bowen apologising for getting things wrong, but then, well, not actually apologising, acknowledging that he got things wrong, but then not saying sorry. In fact, a lot of the other broadcasters haven't really approached this in the kind of balanced and even manner which is required. Would you agree with that, Gideon?
Yeah, I mean, and that has a real-life effect, because if you look, for example, at the blast at Al Ahli Hospital, which was initially blamed by the BBC and others as being an Israeli airstrike on a hospital, and later found to be a Palestinian Islamic Jihad missile that was fired into their own hospital by mistake. The response to that initial coverage was really tangible. I was in the office, it was late, it was about midnight. We've all been working pretty hard the last few weeks since the October 7th massacre. And what we found was, for example, someone had posted on Facebook a post saying, Jews, not Israeli, Jews have just bombed a hospital in Gaza. The next post was a picture of some knives, and the next post was something saying that there aren't going to be any Jews walking alive in London because he's going to go and behead them. And we obviously called that into counter-terrorism as an emergency, but that is a very direct consequence of someone watching the news, seeing this incorrect reporting, getting absolutely incensed, and deciding that they are going to go and commit acts of violence.
Yes.
That's terrifying. And as Mark Twain said, you know, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its shoes on.
On social media, certainly. I don't know whether you've got an opinion on Gary Lineker retweeting the tweet suggesting that the Israelis were perpetuating a sort of constant genocide against the Gazan people.
You know, it's a curious thing. Where was Gary Lineker? You know, Gary Lineker keeps telling us, he's one of many people who says that they stand against all forms of racism. We had 105,000 people on the march yesterday. It was the biggest gathering against anti-Semitism in this country since the Battle of Cable Street in 1936, when Londoners stood side by side with Jews and fought off Sir Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists. It was a big event, and it was so heartwarming to see Londoners and people actually from all over the country turn out. We had people coming in by bus from Manchester, from Leeds, from Glasgow, from Cardiff, from Penzance, all over the place. People were coming in for this. And I did wonder where Gary Lineker was and a few other people who claimed to be against all forms of racism.
I mean, he's not here to defend himself. He may well say he was prepping match of the day, I guess.
Well, he might have been, but why? You know,
Match of the day too.
He tweets so vociferously. I wonder why he didn't find anything to say about it.
It's a very good point. Should we talk about Tommy Robinson's present there, which wasn't particularly welcomed? I mean, some are sort of like holding him up as some kind of folklore hero, but he's no friend of the Jews, is he, Tommy Robinson?
No, I mean, Tommy Robinson is somebody who claims all of a sudden to be standing up for Jews. He claims to have good ideas about who should be leading the Jewish community. He's got all sorts of things to say. We made very clear that he was not welcome.
Yes. Gideon, I think we're having a problem with your mic. So I'm just going to continue talking about some of the findings of your survey while we try and get your sound sorted, because we want to hear the rest of what you want to say. What's interesting about the campaign for anti-Semitism is the polling that it's carried out. So in that poll, 69% of British Jews say that they are now less likely to show visible signs of their Judaism. So no Stars of David. I mean, it's, you know, got echoes, of course, of what happened in the run-up to the Holocaust. Almost half of British Jews have considered leaving the UK due to anti-Semitism since the 7th of October. This is the most staggering figure of all, though. 90% of British Jews say that they would avoid travelling to a city centre if a major anti-Israel demonstration was taking place there. Our urban centres have become no-go zones for Jews. Is that what you think, Gideon, honestly? Because that's really sad to hear.
Look, that's what the Jewish community are telling us. We're asking them how they feel about the centres of towns when these things are going on, and it's hardly surprising. Just on Saturday, and in fact it's interesting to contrast, isn't it? On Saturday we had one of these demonstrations where people were glorifying terrorism. We had people walking along with placards, for example, the one that we've seen quite a few times recently, of a Star of David thrown in a bin.
Yeah.
And the caption saying, "Please keep the world clean." I mean, that's kind of imagery that
You've seen Stars of David conflated with swastikas as well. Just in defence of those who are marching peacefully for Palestine, they'd distance themselves from that. I mean, there is an argument to be said to saying not everybody who is marching for Palestine is marching for Hamas or indeed marching against Jews.
I'm sure that's not why everybody goes on these things, but if you are marching week after week, and bear in mind now we've had 7 weeks of these marches, if every week you are going on a march and you keep seeing people, for example, dressed as Hamas terrorists or carrying those kinds of placards, and you don't speak out and you keep going, what does that say about you? I know what happened with Tommy Robinson, which, you know, we were talking about what happened yesterday, which is that we told Tommy Robinson, you're absolutely not welcome here. If you do try and join us, we will make sure that we make it very clear to you that you are not welcome. And the police turned up and arrested him and took him away. That is not what happens on these marches that we've been seeing on Saturdays, where people are able to dress up as terrorists, incite hatred against Jews, glorify terrorism. And you know what? I don't think, you know, we're just talking about 90% of British Jews saying that they avoid the centre of town. I don't think it's just Jews. I think most of us look at those kinds of displays and think, I don't want to be in town when those kinds of people are in town. Some of the people on these marches truly are terrifying.
Gideon, thank you very much for your time this evening. Sorry about our sound issues, but we did get the thrust of what you were saying, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, still to come on tonight's show, we're going to be speaking about Nigel in the jungle with GB News' Ben Leo on the Gold Coast, and we'll go live to Dubai and speak to world champion boxer and former I'm a Celeb contestant, Amir Khan. Going to have a right punch-up. Well, we actually are going to have a royal punch-up as well, because I'm going to be speaking to Tom Bauer about Omid Scobie's latest book, Endgame, about Harry and Meghan. Stay tuned for that.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting. We don't
hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, joining me now is Ben Leo, GB News reporter extraordinaire, who's on the Gold Coast in Australia. Ben, what's the latest from the jungle?
Morning, Camilla from the Gold Coast. Can I just start very quickly by congratulating you on some epic viewing figures for your Sunday show. Well deserved. You're absolutely smashing it. And if anyone's not seen your show on a Sunday, tune in because you're missing out. Talking of GB News viewers who are also smashing it, Nigel, isn't he doing well in the jungle? It all kicked off again with Fred Sirieix with that Brexit row. He accused Nigel of tanking the economy with Brexit. I'd argue, Fred, I think it was insane money printing during COVID that tanked the economy. The whole world has experienced that. And look at Germany, they're in recession, we're not. Elsewhere, Grace Dent, the food critic, she left yesterday. She was looking pretty knackered and tired in recent episodes, and she's finally bit the bullet and bowed out. Meanwhile, Australia has had its fair share of problems with the small boats crisis in recent years. A lot of Brits want us to sort our problem out by towing the boats back mid-ocean like Australia did in the mid-2000s under Tony Abbott and other prime ministers. I went out and about and spoke to some Aussies and asked them what they thought of that policy and what we should do about our small boats problem in the UK. Take a look at this.
Back, I said, send them all back straight away. Don't even let them stay and get rid of the boat.
I think the main thing to look at is what values you hold as a culture and as a country.
That made me ashamed to be Australian, honestly.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because we're a nation of immigrants. Like, that's who we are.
The world will probably look at Australia in another 10, 15 years and say, well, that wasn't good what Australia did. Look, I think they've probably got to do something similar in Europe or in the UK.
Is wanting to control migration racist?
No.
Why not?
I think it's important to have controls on everything that impacts lots of people.
I'm saying you have to destroy the boats and send them straight back.
Look, you can always send them to Australia.
Yeah, you need people, don't you?
We need people.
I love how busy you're making yourself out there, Ben. I mean, you're not sunbathing, you're going into Vox Pops. I'm not sure whether there's any correlation at all between stopping the boats and the jungle, but it is very good work. Also appreciate your kind words on my Sunday morning show, 9:30 to 11, if you haven't seen it already. But I'm thinking that you need to embrace the spirit of what Nigel's doing a bit more heartily. And we have seen him drinking pints of indescribable fluids and eating things that are best left unsaid. So this is my challenge for you, because you know I'm covering this show all week. I think that you have to do some kind of food challenge. You have to perhaps get a pint of something crushed up, blended with something absolutely awful, and you need to down that with the spirit of the Farage, and you also need to eat something with 6 legs. Is that a deal?
That sounds absolutely terrible, but I agree to do it. Even if it's a tomato juice, that will definitely make me gag. And by the way, just on the sunbathing point, how am I meant to sunbathe in this weather? But challenge accepted. I'll try and get it for you on tomorrow's show. I'll see what I can rustle up.
Everyone in the studio is playing the world's smallest violin for you as you gallivant around the Gold Coast having a great time. You should try the weather here, buddy. Now, let's bring former boxing world champion into the conversation. Of course, he was also an I'm a Celebrity contestant. Amir Khan joins me from Dubai. Amir, now tell us, is it quite boring in there? I mean, we get to see, what, an hour and a half of a 24-hour day, and I would imagine it's a bit mind-numbing.
It is, yeah, you do get very bored in there. Obviously, you're just waiting on Anti-Semitism to come in and give the news on who's going to be going out for a trial, who's going to be going out for a challenge, and then when you get back, you hope to get some food so you can cook a nice meal for yourself. But it does get very boring in there. You have to get to do things. For example, you have to put your mind to, like, maybe working out, or maybe you can't read no books there because they don't allow you to take any books or anything. But there does come times where, you know, you just have to... what kept me going when I was in there was I was praying 5 times a day. I was doing my prayers. So that kept me going and kept me strong in there. But there does come time where you do get very bored and you can lose your head in there. Like, I feel for Nigel, because obviously I'm sure he wants to go on a lot more challenges and trials, and he's been asking to go on a lot more. But what's happened is, because of his health reasons, he can't go to all of them. But overall, as an experience, I think it's just nice to get away. You're alone, away from everyone, and you're just enjoying the jungle.
And when we just looked at some of the clips there of you downing glasses of goodness knows what, I mean, how terrible are those eating trials?
You know, the eating trials were quite easy for me because obviously with the diet I used to be on when I used to be in training camp, when I used to be a boxer, I ate whatever they put in front of me. But there does come times where they put some crazy animals that have been blended, some fruits I've never had before that taste like... Oh, it's really bad, honestly, but the food one. But because we were so hungry in there, you end up gulping it down because you're so hungry. Whatever they put in front of you, you have to down it. And you don't do it just for yourself. You do it for your team as well, because you know you're going to get a good slap-up meal. Which I call a slap-up meal, but you get some food in the evening.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to see what happens if Tony Bellew gets too hungry. But having said that, Amir, maybe we do need a punch-up in the jungle. I mean, are people watching it because they want some drama and they want some conflict, maybe?
I think Nigel's been giving a lot of drama in there, obviously, with the Brexit he's been talking about. And there's been... He's obviously... He has had a hard time in there, I believe, because obviously with the Brexit thing... No, I think sometimes it's always better to have a good, quiet, easygoing campmates around you, because you don't want no drama, because already you're stressed out, away from your family, away from your friends, hardly any food. So the last thing you want is any arguments or any problems.
What's your tip for who might win? I mean, do you think that Nige could be crowned king of the jungle?
Well, I mean, who knows? I know because of his health reasons he can't go out to all challenges or trials, but he does ask and does want to be out there. He does love a debate when he's in the jungle that maybe people like, I don't know, or maybe dislike, but King of the Jungle is a big ask. But like I said, he has been doing good in there. It's a tough one, this one, because I think everyone in there has been doing really well and they're getting on with each other well.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Amir. I'm sure you'll be glued to it, as will all of us. Thank you very much. Now, let's get on to the What the Farage moment, which I would like to rename, if nobody minds, just for this week. Can we call it Can You Believe It? Do you get what I've done there? Can you believe it? Now, this, as you know, is this section where we take something from the paper that we just can't believe and say, what the Farage? Well, this is my choice for this evening. New prison guidelines mean some convicted criminals, including sex offenders, will be let out almost a week early before Christmas. Eligible prisoners with a release date between December the 22nd and Boxing Day, I'm not making this up, are now set to be freed on Wednesday, December the 20th. For some convicts, that will mean 6 days earlier than expected. Do you know why this is? Because Christmas falls this year on a Monday and they can't release prisoners on a Friday because apparently if we release them over the weekend, they might have more of a chance to re-offend. So there you have it. We reward violent and sex criminals by getting them home for Christmas. There you have it. What more can I say? Now, great conversation coming up later. One of my specialist subjects, if you don't mind me saying, we're going to be discussing Harry and Meghan and the new book, which they absolutely haven't briefed, haven't informed the author about at all. He's just given an overwhelmingly positive view because he really loves the Sussexes. I'll be discussing all that with Tom Bauer in just a jiffy. Don't go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Right, let's talk about Endgame, the new book by Omid Scobie. That name might not be familiar to you. He's the author of Finding Freedom, which was a hagiography of Harry and Meghan's exit from the royal family. Just to fill you in on Omid, I mean, I used to work with him because I covered the Royal Beat for many, many years. He used to come on royal tours, ask me how I broke my stories. I used to tell him, share a bit of my wisdom. And now he is basically in the habit of turning over the royal family in any way he can, seemingly on behalf of the Sussexes, although they insist that they don't brief him at all and that they have no contact with him and they couldn't possibly comment on some of the allegations in this book, which include that Harry is willing to forget the royal row, but Meghan refuses, that Meghan ran Scobie when he was being harassed online. They're not friends, but she did manage to call him when she noticed he was getting some grief on social media. Princess Anne was apparently behind the eviction of the couple from Frogmore. Meghan and Kate were encouraged to dress like Diana. Kate's scared to do anything other than photo ops. Also takes aim at the king, as we would imagine. He's often envious of his son's popularity, said to have used Harry's teenage drug troubles to improve his own image. The king called Harry a fool to do the Netflix series. Probably most people agree with that. William is hot-headed. He's a company man, increasingly willing to allow the palace to deploy dirty tricks. Both him and the princess are said to have found the lampooning of Harry and Meghan on South Park as hilarious. They probably weren't alone there. Let's bring Tom Bauer into the conversation. He's a journalist, author and royal biographer. Tom, what do you make of Endgame so far?
Well, I think it's a rather risible and worthless book written by a man who, we've got to remember, completely lied about his sources last time, or told inaccuracies.
He suggested that he didn't have that much contact with the Sussexes, and then during a trial, Meghan's trial for privacy and breach of confidence and data protection, it was discovered that she had actually sent an email where she admitted knowing Omid and perhaps wanting to inform some of Finding Freedom.
No, much more than that, Camilla. What happened was he signed a statement saying it was the truth for the trial against the Mail on Sunday, saying he had no contact whatsoever and no briefing whatsoever from the Sussexes. And we know that the Sussexes spokesman, Jason Knauf, sat for 2 hours with Emma Scobie, reading him the briefing notes that Meghan herself had written.
I suppose
she herself also
the more
said,
important question is, have they informed this book?
Of course they have. And what he does is, he doesn't actually talk to Meghan directly, as he didn't for Finding Freedom. He talks to the pressman or presswoman. I mean, they change all the time. But the whole point about what I'm trying to say about Emma Scobie is that he was absolutely inaccurate in the sworn statement he made, and that in itself was a catastrophe because it, in the end, went against the Mail on Sunday. But the point about the current book is this, that Omid Scobie clearly has nothing new to say. All he's got is silly stories like King Charles irons his shoelaces.
Well, who doesn't? Let's be honest. Come on, we've all been there.
But it's worse than that. I do find his attack on Kate really gratuitous, but of course that is very much Meghan speaking.
Well, it's basically depicting Kate as a Stepford wife that doesn't have much use of...
And she's a wonderful woman. She's doing a terrific job. And the point about him, he's looking for headlines, and us sitting here is giving him headlines. But really, he's an incorrigible rascal who's getting away with it.
Scobie brands the institution of monarchy tone-deaf, racist and financially reckless. Although a review has commented, this is quite interesting, Harry and Meghan emerged glowing with goodness like extras from a Ready Brek ad. The Independent gave it 3 out of 5 stars and said that Scobie was unfailingly sympathetic to the Sussexes. He does not hold them accountable for anything. This is the problem. Where's the accountability? Is it everybody else's fault, or might the couple have at times been at fault?
But it's not the trouble. The point is he is their spokesman. That's why we know.
Unofficial?
Well, quite official, because we know...
Unpaid, apart from the proceeds of the book.
Well, of course, but we know that from Finding Freedom, the statement he signed, which was untrue, inaccurate, whatever you want to call it. Again, he's saying he's had no help. Why would he be praising the Sussexes other than being as their cheerleader? And this is the really important part about this book. It shows the Sussexes are continuing their war. They are all the time looking for a way to needle and to discomfort and to destabilise the royal family because it's in their financial and professional interest. And that is really where the sin of this book is. That actually the attack on the royal family is Meghan and Harry talking in their anger that they can't actually make any headway in California, in America, with their careers, other than by rubbishing the royal family, who tried their hardest to make them feel at home and all the rest of it. And so I think what Scobie's doing is quite shameful. But on the other hand, what I I think Meghan and Harry have done is quite shameful,
Although
so they're in the
that's an
same
offer.
boat.
I mean, he's got his shtick, he's doing his thing, he's making money from it. Is there something slightly admirable about this guy's chutzpah? I mean, he's come up with 2 books. The press are all over it.
Well, they are, because we know from the first book that it was Meghan speaking, and now we know it's Meghan speaking again. And so this isn't because the book contains amazing revelations. It doesn't at all. But we know that he is the tool of the Sussexes. And as the tool of the Sussexes, he has done the best he can to blacken the royal family.
Any hope of reconciliation between the king and his youngest son, or the royal brothers, Tom?
Absolutely not, and nor should there be. I mean, the Sussexes are beyond the pale, and they should stay in Montecito.
Doesn't particularly help the king's image, though, to be estranged from his son, and indeed his grandchildren.
Scobie isn't going to write the 3rd book. I mean, he's busted it now. He's said all he can.
Do you reckon?
Absolutely. Well, he's got nothing more. He's got nothing new to say in this book.
Might Meghan write a book? I mean,
yes.
interestingly, Scobie's boasting about knowing who the so-called royal racists are, plural, but he won't name them for legal reasons. Isn't the biggest danger that Meghan pens her own autobiography, blows the whole thing to pieces?
Well, I described in my own book on Meghan who the 2 people were, and there's no legal reason why he can't reveal it. It's just that he's too scared to do it. But the truth is in my book about that. But I do believe that Meghan is writing her book.
Right.
I do believe that will eventually come out. That's how that will be their meal ticket when the Netflix money goes. And that'll be a huge sensation, because Meghan has, what she says will be damning of the royal family, very difficult. And that's why I've always felt that King Charles and the Cambridges have not handled this properly. They should be much more on the front foot. They should actually condemn the lies and the rest that are put out in these sort of books.
Tom Bower, thank you very much, as ever, for your intriguing analysis of this latest book from Obid Scobie. Very much indeed. I feel like Blofeld at a turn.
You need your white cat.
Don't I just? Jacob Rees-Mogg, how lovely to see you
Very
in these
nice to see
circumstances.
you.
I never normally see you in the evening.
No.
Because I'm on air in the morning.
That's right. No, if I'm very privileged on a Sunday morning, I get invited onto your programme.
Well, bless you, but I know it's on the Sabbath, and therefore there are restrictions to your viewing.
Well, only if I'm going to Mass at the time.
Well, exactly so. Now, enough about that. Tell us what you've got coming up on your own great show.
Well, I'll be talking a bit more about this extraordinary book, and I'll be quoting Edmund Burke, who said, "I thought 10,000 swords must have leapt from their scabbards to avenge even a look that threatened her with insult." And after this blighter Scobie is rude about the Princess of Wales, I am waiting for the British public to metaphorically lift 10,000 swords from their scabbards, because having the Princess of Wales castigated unfairly, unreasonably, and in search of headlines is, I think, quite improper. So we'll talk about that, but also the big subject of the day, Suella Braverman's revealing the deal she had with Rishi Sunak, which was why she backed him, is why Boris Johnson isn't Prime Minister, that was going to deal with migration, and I'm afraid we haven't. And this is a blot on the copybook of the Conservatives.
Aren't they moving away from the Rwanda plan? You've heard it in the language today in the Commons, haven't you?
Well,
it's not the be-all and end-all. We shouldn't be fixated on this.
The question is, where's this Plan B? I mean, it's nearly a fortnight since we had the judgment. Plan B was meant to be ready, and it seems to be phantasmagoric.
Well, we'll be tuned in for that. Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed for previewing what you've got coming up, Jacob. Well, I'll be back tomorrow again at 7. As I said, I'm here all week standing in for Nigel. Please do stay tuned for Jacob's show, and again tune in tomorrow. But for now, here's a little look at what the weather might be like even tomorrow.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying cold throughout this week, really frosty mornings will become pretty frequent, and so will quite a bit of sunshine by day. It wasn't a lot of sunshine around today, quite a lot of cloud and still some outbreaks of rain coming into northern England and eastern England. And the showers in northern Scotland will turn to snow, but only really over the tops of the hills. Might turn a bit icy, could turn a bit foggy in places, and temperatures dropping below freezing across northern Britain, certainly in the countryside. Further south, just about holding up a few degrees above zero. On to Tuesday, we'll start with quite a lot of cloud over the Midlands, the odd shower here and there, but that should clear away. The showers in northeast Scotland will turn increasingly wintry, so some sleet and snow coming in here, certainly by the end of the day, even to low levels. For many, though, it's a dry and a bright day tomorrow. It's going to be cold, 4 or 5 degrees across the north, 7 or 8 further south, but feeling chilly with the winds, which will continue to bring wintry showers in across northeast Scotland, but also maybe southeast Scotland, northeast England. We could see some sleet and snow
showers on Tuesday night and into Wednesday, so it could be a little icy here. Again, for many, Wednesday's dry and fine, chilly, yes, but with quite a bit of sunshine. Temperatures, though, well below average for the time of year. With the cold air in place, eyes down to the southwest, because these low pressure systems could introduce some wet weather, and that means the potential, just the risk of some snow in the south later this week.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the media.